Today, we're going to take a look at how to calculate grade point average, or GPA, in MMS generations. Once we log in and open the database, we need to confirm we're looking at the correct school and school year where we want to calculate GPA. The example we're looking at is a high school where GPA might be calculated, for example, to include on a report card. In this Tech Byte, we'll look at what's required to set up prior to performing the GPA calculations, and then 3 different types of GPAs that schools often choose to calculate. The current year GPA that includes calculations for the current school year, the term GPA based on a marking period like a quarter or trimester, and the career GPA that calculates GPA across school years. And then we'll also talk about what needs to be or may need to be fixed when GPA calculations don't show up correctly. So prior to actually computing grade point averages, we have to create grade point average categories that identify the GPA that the school is going to calculate. And that's done in grade reporting jobs, more grades editing jobs, and edit GPA categories. So we can see some examples here of types of GPA a school might choose to calculate, like the career GPA, the end of year GPA, or term GPA, some different examples that we'll be looking at. You could simply add another category if needed by the add a new record. We also need to consider how grade schemes are set up because these will be used for the GPA calculations. So we're going to look at the edit grade schemes in more grades editing jobs. We look at the grade storage bin definitions, and a couple of things to take note of is whether a particular course or grade bin is indicated as allowing course credit, which we indicate with a check mark in that grade field. And that's important if you're going to calculate GPA that may be weighted by course credit. And then at the grade assignment, weighting plans is a checkbox option for each grade plan. You see include in GPA, and most often what schools will do is they will choose the final average, as you see here, to be included in the GPA. So the 2 options here that we need to pay attention to are include in GPA and also the credit percentage, the value that will be assigned to that particular grade field in the calculations. Another item to look at before we actually calculate GPAs is the course catalog. In the school management jobs, the course catalog is in school management jobs, and we see there's an option to include in GPA. There's also an option for the number of credits and also a GPA level. So an example of why we might have a GPA level set to 0 could be if the school doesn't in fact calculate GPAs like an elementary school, or the school calculates GPAs and uses a simple grading system where a grade like an A+ is worth the same value of GPA grade points regardless of whether the course curriculum is at a higher level, like an AP or honors course. So in this instance, we have a GPA level of 1 set up for the higher curriculum level courses, like the AP and the honors course. And where we set those levels up is in the Edit Valid Grades list. The grade stored in the valid grades list is what is going to be used for the GPA calculations when include in GPA is set to yes. You see that column here. And then you have the grade points assigned to each level, like the higher level courses, perhaps AP or honors again, may be assigned a higher grade point value. And then also there's a pass-fail no credit. So that will come into account for GPA calculations. If a course is indicated as no credit, it won't be included. You can also mark that as a no for include in GPA. And so an example might be this I for incomplete. And that will come into play with the calculations as well. And then the last place that we'll look before we go into calculating GPA is the edit course sections, just to make note here that a grade plan needs to be assigned for the course and section for it to be included in GPA calculations. So now we're actually ready to compute GPA, which we do in the grade reporting operations, and compute grade point average. The options we have here are based on the GPA categories that we set up previously. And if we have settings that are saved, we can recall those settings, which I'm going to do in this instance. So I'm going to choose the year to date. And what we'll see is that many of the options are the same for the GPAs that we're going to calculate, but we may choose to indicate them differently. There are a couple of minor differences, but we'll go into the most detail here with the first sample of GPA, the current school year GPA. So the options we see here in our drop-down come from the GPA categories that we looked at in our setup, and we're going to look first of all, at the current school year GPA. I can recall my settings, which I'm going to do here. And that will allow you a very useful feature for coming back and recalling what you set up previously for the different GPA calculations. So we'll take the most time as we go through the current school year GPA, and then we'll also look at term and career and how they might be different. So the first question here is whether we want to weight the GPA by course credit. And if we select yes, then courses that carry more credit value will count more toward the GPA than courses that are worth less credits. And we can see the actual formula that is used to calculate the GPA with the grade points and the adjusted credit value. So it is looking at the grade points, the levels, what we set up in the course catalog and in the valid grades list, and all of the other setup items that we looked at. If we would choose no here, you see that the formula changes and it doesn't take into account the credits. Since we're saying no to course credits, I'm going to change it back to yes, because that's what we want in this instance. And something else to note that we talked about in the list of valid grades is the difference between credits attempted and earned. A student might have 10 credits attempted, and if that student didn't pass one of their 3 credit courses, then they would have only 7 credits earned with 10 credits attempted. So that could then potentially lower the student's GPA. And then we also have to answer a question about whether we want to use total grade points for the GPA, either yes or no, and it tells us GPA is a sum of grade points, and it in fact changes the formula. And then the next item that we designate is what type of GPA we are calculating, whether it's a career, current year, or term. We're looking at current year at the moment, and we'll come back and see these options available when we choose career and term GPAs in the next examples. The levels here go back to the levels we assigned in the course catalog and the edit valid grades list, where, for example, the A+ level 0 was 4 grade points and level 1 was 5 points. So we can choose either to use the same level for all courses or leave it set up as it was in the course catalog that we looked at. Then we have the option to choose the grade point value group that applies. We can choose one of the 5 possible, which also refers back to the edit valid grades list. We also have an option to allow substitution if empty grade fields are found, and if we say yes, then we can choose what that substitution should be. We can choose defaults if we wish, and so for example, if we have MMS looking for a semester 2 average and it doesn't find that grade, it will then know to substitute what it finds for quarter 3, and if it doesn't find that grade, then for quarter 4. And you can add additional substitutions here with this add grade fields option. And then the last option that we have here is whether we want to include transfer courses in the GPA calculation. When those transfer courses are set up at the Edit Transfer Courses and Grades operation, it is optional to include credits and GPA level for those courses, and those will be included if we have this set to yes for transfer courses. If this is the first time we're coming in here to calculating GPAs, again, it's a good idea to save your settings. You can also choose a student or group of students here. You can sort. You could do year of graduation. If you sort by year of graduation, you could calculate GPA for all of your seniors. For example, if you want to see the GPA for those students. And in this instance, I'm going to deselect and simply choose one student, and I'll go ahead and process. MMS confirms what I am choosing to compute. I say yes, goes through the calculation, confirms it, and then the next option I have is the View Print Log button, so we can review the results here. And a couple of items to note here. We see the courses that were included. We see the options that we selected. The category year to date, we did choose to substitute. We included transfer courses and so forth. And so the courses that are included here would only be the ones that have a yes indicated for include in GPA. So if there are other courses that should be in the GPA calculation, then you would need to go back to the course catalog and confirm that option is set to yes. And remember again that the courses need to have a grade plan. So in this instance, we don't see a grade field. We see a 0 for credits. And for this 301-01 course, it tells us here in the right-hand column has no grade plan. So that would need to be assigned in the edit course sections that we looked at as part of the setup. The grade column shows the grades that are considered towards the GPA calculation. If the grade is not shown, then typically that means the course either isn't yet complete, or perhaps you need to go back and choose to substitute grade fields. But again, if you see a 0 credit listed here, then typically on the right-hand side, you will see the reason why that is empty, and it shows 0 grade points and empty grade field, no substitution. So that was the reasoning for that particular one. So there may be adjustments that you need to go back and make at the Edit Valid Grades list, or the course catalog, or the grade bins, or the credits. Any of the items that we talked about in the setup, if you need to make changes and then recalculate the GPA. Looking at another example here, if I choose the career GPA to span across school years, then the option here for career GPA, since I recalled my settings, I see this is now available, set up school years, summary records, and I choose the school years that apply. So for my seniors, it might be the past 4 school years, and then the grade records. And I have selected each of the end of year GPAs that have been calculated previously. And again, same options available here. The GPA level, grade point value group, substitution, and transfer courses. And again, I'm going to just choose Amy in this instance, go ahead and process that, confirms I am calculating the career GPA, and then processes that. I can also view the log for that and confirm that all of the correct courses and school years are included. And then the last example that we're going to look at is a term GPA. In this instance, we'll look at quarter one. So again, if we need to adjust the formula for that, we can. In this instance, we are computing a term GPA. We select the grade fields that apply, which in this instance is only the quarter one grade. Click OK. The other options are the same on the right-hand side, except that we don't have the opportunity for substitution here since there is only one grade field being considered. And I'm choosing Amy again, processing, get my confirmation, and that is the compute grade point average operation. And then one final item that we'll take a look at is the student grade editor. And what we will see is that for Amy, the student, where we calculated GPA, we can see a summary of the grade points, the credits attempted, and the GPA that we calculated. And that concludes the setup and calculation of GPAs, as well as other items that you might need to consider if the GPA calculations are not accurate.